Oh my gosh, guys, I didn't go live and I was talking, but it was only for a few minutes. So no golden comments missed there. I was just saying hello to everybody. Thanks for joining again today. It's early, well, not really early. It's 9:30 here, and that's why I'm running late because I'm always pottering around in the sun. I like to have a slow start in the morning. So I got the kids ready for school and then just was lounging around with my cats in the spring sunshine. So anyway, nice to see you guys. And I'll say a quick hello to a few of the people I can see already. First of all, my mods, Hebby and Shibby, two of my lovely friends who have really been supporting me, and I really appreciate it. You guys are wonderful. Hello to Carol. I think I saw you up there earlier in the chat. You're a very loyal watcher of my channel and a commenter, and I really appreciate you. Louise, I saw you were in the chat as well. So nice to have you in here. I know that there are some other people too. So as you guys chat, I'll try and say hello along the way. Today, again, I've got hey Peggy, nice to see you, and great to watch you earlier in the week as well. I watched a bit of your live too. Yeah, I've got a presentation again today because otherwise I just ramble and talk for hours. So again, just letting everyone know the presentation isn't because I'm trying to be a lecturer or the expert in everything. Today's topic does have a little bit of my expertise in it because we're talking about memory research, which does fall under the umbrella of psychology. So I feel a little bit more confident speaking about that. But I don't feel super confident about today's topic because it is the timeline, and the timeline is something that has been a really contentious issue in this case. So yeah, hopefully people aren't too put off because my timeline is quite different to the timelines that have been suggested by other people who advocate for Rick Allen. There's a reason for that. I don't dismiss any timeline, but I do believe that the timeline that I'm about to present to you has, I guess, kind of is more. I'm trying to think of the word. Oh gosh, I'm really not finding my words today. It's the fact is that my timeline doesn't involve as many people missing each other, I guess, and so to me that feels a little bit more palatable, perhaps, for people who are looking into this case and don't have all the background that we have. I know that I had to really understand the timeline in order to come to my conclusions about Rick Allen's innocence. And so I do think that other people would maybe need to do that too. So, hi, Jared. You're welcome to your opinion. You may not think it's flawed, and that's fine as long as everybody is respectful. I don't mind. Obviously, if other people have different opinions, but just hear me out. See if you can kind of follow through with this timeline and see what you think. You can carry on and believe that he's guilty, or you may think he's innocent, and that's up to you. But I guess just weighing up all of the evidence is what's important. I'm just going to pause for a minute and get the presentation ready. I'll be back in 1 sec. Okay, I'm back. Now I need to pop that on the stage. So my technical skills are not the best, but hopefully I'll be able to maintain the two screens. Hi, Mandy. Nice to see you. Hi, Mino, Dino as well, and anyone else that I've missed as you've been coming in. Hebby's 100% right. All opinions are welcome as long as they come respectfully. Yeah, absolutely. Like there's no issue here around us disagreeing. The issue is around how we disagree and how we speak to each other. And if you see flaws in my timeline or any of the things that I'm presenting, please do speak up. I have no issue with being corrected. I've been corrected multiple times when it comes to this case, particularly around legal things and technical things that are outside my expertise. So, yeah, for sure, definitely tell me if I'm getting something wrong or if you disagree or if you have any questions. I'm not going to be dismissive of people because that's not in my nature. And I don't think that that's particularly helpful. Okay, so let's get into the timeline, guys. This is something that has absolutely consumed me at times. I've even had my kids drawing things out with me, trying to figure this out. It is so complicated and it is so hard to figure out how to make sense of this all, whether we believe the earlier timeline or a later timeline. It's just so confusing. Anyway, rather than ramble on and on, let's get into it. So, where have I put the timeline now? Okay, sorry guys, I'm really struggling this morning. So, is it possible to debunk the guilty timeline while sticking to the facts? Because what the guilters, and I hate calling them the guilters because it sounds rude, but that's just a term I'm using. I'm just not a pejorative term. But the people who believe Rick Allen is guilty will often quote the timeline as being and is someone who tends to like to hyperfocus on things, and the Delphi case has certainly been a hyperfocus. Oh, is there no audio? Are you not hearing me? Can you hear me now, guys? Oh, no one can hear me? Oh, I'm back. I wonder what happened. I didn't press anything. Okay, let me know if that happens again. Sorry, guys. Probably not a bad thing that you couldn't hear me because I was just rambling anyway. Okay, let's. It was just doing the disclaimer, so no one needs to really worry about that. You know that I'm not a legal professional, law enforcement, and these are just my opinions, and nothing is proven. It's just speculative. Okay. So the agenda for today is to discuss Betsy Blair's timeline, the four girls' timeline, Rick Allen's timeline, just briefly look at Abby and Libby's unfortunately short timeline on the trails, putting all the timelines together, and most importantly, I guess my contribution today is looking at memory research and how it helps us to understand maybe some of the contradictions or points of contention when it comes to the timeline. Now, I probably don't need to give you guys the key of all of the abbreviations, but that's on the slides in case anybody is going through these slides and thinks, who's BB, who's BG? Because, yeah, there are lots of abbreviations in this case. Okay, so here's my little Canva map of the trails. I was pretty proud of myself getting this done because I'm not the best with this sort of stuff. But I think now that this is a good representation of the trails and a fairly good representation of the times between different areas. Of course, realistically, we don't know how quickly people walk. Some people are going to walk faster. Some people are going to meander around. But these are sort of approximations of the time frames. So what you'll see here is from the trailhead over to the trail split, which is where it's the fork, where there is a memorial now for Abby and Libby. That's about 7 to 8 minutes. From the CPS to the trailhead's about 3 minutes. The Freedom Bridge, I believe, is about a minute or two if you're walking across there. Yes, Shibby. Yes, people can definitely ask if they're not familiar with the initials. I'll probably use full names when I'm talking anyway. So, I'll probably spell it out. But if you're looking at the slides without listening to me, yeah, definitely just look at the key. So we've got here the Mears Farm entrance, which is where the girls were dropped off. There's about a 30-second walk to the trail split or the fork. We know that the final stretch is about 5 minutes. I think crossing the bridge is maybe a couple of minutes. And this one here is a bit of a contentious issue, the 505 Nature Preserve. I've heard varying time frames discussed about it, but 15 to 20 minutes is what I kind of gauged from watching a couple of YouTubers who actually walked down that trail and back again. I think it depends how far you go. Obviously, it's quite bushy towards the end. So I think that first sort of 6 minutes or 7 minutes, so probably around halfway, is fairly it's got a path, and then I think beyond that it can get a bit bushy. I guess it would depend as well on the time of the year. In winter, I suppose, where there are not as many leaves around, then it would be easier probably to get to the creek bed. So yeah, this leads all the way down to the creek bed, and this is where you can get up close to the water. We've got here, this is the bench that Rick Allen says that he sits at. So this bench here does overlook the water. Again, it doesn't look clear from this. I mean, this is not to scale. He doesn't overlook the highway. He overlooks the water here. There's a couple of other benches along the way. I think that I've missed one at least of these benches because it's hard to see from videos. I've clearly not been to the trails. I believe there might be one over here too on this side. So what else have we got here? We've got the Hoosier Harvest Store camera here, which figures quite highly in the case. And we know that when cars are seen on this camera, it's about 30 seconds between that camera and the Mears Farm entrance. So this is going to be important later when we're looking at timelines. And then finally, we've got the Old Camden Road parking, which is the other parking space or parking area that Rick mentions in his interview. And so that involves going over this small bridge. And again, this small bridge figures a bit later when we think about what Betsy Blair saw as well. She was driving on this road. Okay, so we can come back to this at other times, but this gives you a bit of the layout, which I think is important. When I first looked at this case, I had no idea of the layout, and without that, it can be really tricky to understand where people walked, and it can actually seem like it's quite possible to be on this trail and not see each other. But when you actually look at the layout and you watch people walking the trails, which there are so many YouTubers who've done this. So if you are interested, watch some of the YouTubers walking through it. Hi, Charles. Nice to see you. Yeah, you'll get a better sense of it. But realistically, there aren't many spots to hide on this trail. This here, the 505 Nature Preserve, is probably the main area that you could be off the trails and people could be walking up and down here and not see you. And then as we get to the four girls' testimony, we know that they actually went down around here at the beginning of the bridge and went down to an area here near the water as well. So again, they would have been off the trail at that point as well. So it's really complicated, even just like getting your head around a place you've never visited. So yeah, I definitely recommend not just looking at maps, but also watching some of the YouTubers over the years that have walked the trails. What's really interesting is you'll see people walking the trails at various times in the year as well. So it gives you a sense of what the landscape is like in winter versus summer. And I came across one that was pretty much, I think it was April 2017. So I thought that was a really good one to watch because the trails have changed a little bit since the crime as well, because they've updated it, they've created a better path and things like that. So I think the 2017 video that I watched, the walkthrough, was pretty useful, but also people do different stretches of it too. So you'll see some people just doing the 505 part, some people will do this part, some people will do all the way. So it gives you that sense of all the various areas, and again, the speed at which the time at which it can take between the sections. I find like people are often puffed out as they're doing this, so that suggests they're walking quite quickly. So before we move on from the map, is there any comments? Does anyone think that the map is inaccurate in any way? I don't know if anyone here in the chat has ever been to the trails. I would really love to walk the trails because I think it would just give so much of a better understanding, which is why it's so unfortunate that the defence weren't able to take their motion to take the jury to the trails, to the crime scene, was denied, of course, because I think that would have really helped people to understand the layout better. I feel for that jury if they've never been on those trails trying to figure this all out. Okay, so let's move on because I don't think any of us have been there. Charles says no, you've never been to Indiana. Either have I. Okay, so this stuff I have raised in the previous live and also on social media over the last few days. So I'm not going to kind of drill this out too much. You can watch the previous video if you want to look at this. But what you're seeing here is the query that I have now around whether some of these interviews and statements of Betsy Blair and Bree Wilbur particularly were part of the lost recorded over evidence back in 2017. Reason I think that is because as I was going through the testimony, I noticed that the defense keep referring back to the 2020 interview with Bree Wilbur. And I thought, well, why do they just keep going back to the 2020 interview? Why don't they go back to the 2017 interview? Because that would be much more reliable and accurate. And then I also looked at the discovery map, which again, I understand is not the full picture of all discovery. But again, we don't see a 2017 interview with Betsy Blair or Bree Wilbur in that either. So that was kind of, again, another clue that maybe those statements were lost. And most importantly, and this will come up a little bit later as well, what I noticed was that Bree Wilbur talks about seeing other people on the trails that day, and yet we have no idea who those people were, what they looked like. We don't have any other details about them. And that could be because memory is flawed, but I also thought, well, maybe she did have more details back in 2017. But we don't have those details now. And the jury were being directed, or we're hearing her be directed back to the 2020 interview, which is 3 years after the crime and far less reliable. Okay, so I'm not going to go into that in too much detail because that's been covered in the previous live I did, and you're welcome to watch that or look at the presentation. I've got links to all of these presentations on the community page of this channel. Okay, so let's go to Betsy Blair. Gosh, the amount of times that I've looked through information about Betsy Blair, my kids know who Betsy Blair is. I heard my son the other day saying Betsy, like randomly. And of course, Betsy's not a common name, so we kind of know where that's come from. These poor kids. They're like completely consumed by all of this with me. They're really into it though. My kids are really like, obviously they're not into the crime aspect of it. We don't go into too much detail about that, but they are really into solving the mystery and advocating for Rick Allen. Okay, so who does Betsy Blair see? Well, she says she sees no one on the trails during that first portion of time that she's at the trails between 12:03-ish and 1:15. She indicates she just doesn't see anybody. What she does say she sees is the 4 girls on the small bridge at approximately 1:45. So just going back to the small bridge, this bridge here. So she's driving back this way because basically to get to the trails from town, you can drive this way and then you kind of go around and then, oh gosh, not on the Huser not the highway. Sorry, you drive. Gosh, guys, I'm sorry. I'm all over the place today. You drive across this way under that small bridge, which is where she would have seen the 4 girls as they were walking off the trails. And then it kind of loops and goes around and then comes back to the County Road 300 and goes past the Hoosier Harvest Store. And then there she parks just there. So if she was driving back, we know that she's caught on the Hoosier Harvest Store camera at 1:46. So that would have been about 1:44 where she drove under there and saw the girls, which marries up quite well, as you'll see later, with the 4 girls sort of time frame of leaving the trails that day. Okay, so She sees Bridge Guy at approximately 1:50ish. All of the times that I'm putting today are approximate. So even if I haven't said approximately before them, they are always approximate. Obviously, I don't have the exact times, except maybe perhaps with the Hoosier Harvest Store timestamps, if we're to believe them. She does not see the 4 girls walking on the trails. So she notices the 4 girls on the small bridge, but she does not see them walking on the trails that day, which suggests that even though they have a crossover time on the trails, there must be a time where she or they are down by the creek bed and therefore miss each other. She says she doesn't see Rick at all. Okay, so this is going to be important later when we actually map it all out. Mandy is saying there were several sets of girls that day, so who knows which set Rick Allen even saw. Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people are talking about. Are there another set of girls? I tend to believe differently, perhaps, to the norm in this, and I'll explain it a bit later. But yeah, definitely. I mean, we just don't know exactly who was on the trails at which times because there is so little clarity when it comes to some of the statements. So Betsy Blair's times in terms of when she arrives and when she leaves the trail are well corroborated by the Hoosier Half Store footage and the Fitbit data, making her arrivals and departures pretty rock solid. Now, again, I know that this is a contentious issue, but if you look at the Hoosier Harvest Store timestamps and you look at the Fitbit data, and we'll look at this in more detail a bit later, they do marry up quite well. I tend to believe the timestamping on the footage because that was FBI verified. I trust the FBI on this case, not necessarily trusting some of the other people who investigated this case. But I do believe that the timestamps of her car that day are valid and they do really marry up with the Fitbit data really well. So that sort of suggests that they're pretty solid. Her description of her loops, though, is less reliable because it seems unlikely that she could have done 3 whole loops in the way that she described. And then I've just put this note here, why her statement's unreliable. Where is the 2017 interview? Why would I trust the FBI, Charles? I'm not sure that I trust them all the time with everything, but in this case, I feel like the FBI were more trustworthy than anyone else investigating the case. So just talking about the loops, the reason that I don't feel they're reliable, and I think a lot of people agree on this, is just the timings don't make sense. So you can see that she's on the trails from 12 to 1:15. So that's an hour and 15 minutes. And she says she does 2 loops in that. But then the last time that she's on the trail is 1:45-ish to about 2:15, which is only half an hour. So it doesn't make sense. Did she take longer to do the loops the first time and less time to do the loops on the last run? It's hard to know. But yeah, I just can't marry it up as making sense for her to have done the 3 loops the way that she described. Okay. So Betsy Blair's description of Bridge Guy. So she sees an unknown male on the Monon High Bridge, describes him as if he was waiting, looking for someone, 20s or 30s, so younger, brown, poofy hair, average height, not short, no facial hair. So clearly describing someone younger, someone with hair, quite obvious hair. I know there's been some comments about her saying 10 out of 10 and beautiful. I don't know about that. I think my understanding is she said that the sketch was a 10 out of 10, as in it matched what she saw as opposed to her rating his level of attractiveness. But I mean, who knows? Betsy Blair would be from the what was that website that you used to be able to post a picture on and find out what people rated you? I can't remember, but I think some of the people in my generation will know that. You got like ratings out of 10. I can't believe I even did that back in the day. Gosh, it's a sucker for punishment. Okay, so we can see from her description of Bridge Guy, he doesn't sound anything like Rick Allen. And hard to reconcile how she even thinks that her description matches the sketch. But, the reality is we're now looking at sketches, years later. And what the research shows is that identification for suspects can be quite accurate in the early days, like in the immediate aftermath. But as years go on, people get more and more kind of contaminated in terms of their view of what someone looked like. We're going to talk about the memory research later, but this kind of really marries up with that. You know, when her first description is this younger person, then she's seen sketches, she's seen media coverage, and there's been this drift towards the guy she saw being the picture of Bridge Guy or the video of Bridge Guy. Okay, Betsy Blair's timeline. So this is my attempt to map it out. Again, like I said, these times are guesses, they're approximations. This is not solid. I'm not Betsy Blair, so I wouldn't know her timeline. I don't think Betsy Blair would even know her timeline now, 8 years later. So these are just approximations based on the geography of the trails and based on the times that we've estimated in terms of like going between places. I don't know how fit Betsy is. I don't know how sprightly she is. But yeah, so this is just a guess. So we know that she definitely parked at the Mears entrance around 12:03. So that's confirmed by the camera timestamp of 12:02 and the Fitbit data. We know that she probably gets out of her car a couple of minutes later and starts to walk towards the bridge, probably arrives there at about 12 p.m. There is nobody there on the trails at that time, according to her. There's no one else she sees. She then walks back to the trail split, so it's about another 5 or 6 minutes, and walks the 505 loop. Now, this is where it gets tricky because she says she walks half of the loop and comes back. That's possible, or does she walk the whole loop? It's hard to really know exactly how far she walked, but this is my rough estimation, and it fits with the rest of the timelines, so that's what I'm sticking with at the moment. So about 17 minutes I've left her to be on the 505 loop. She then comes back to the trail split and walks to the Freedom Bridge. She walks back to the trail split again. It seems like she doesn't stop a lot. Like looking at her Fitbit data, it doesn't suggest that she spends a lot of time stopping. The activity in each segment of the Fitbit. I'm really losing my words today, guys. But yeah, the activity in each of the segments is fairly uniform. So it suggests that she's kind of at a fairly kind of similar pace throughout her walk. So yes, she heads right back and goes back to the Monon High Bridge, back to the trail split, back to the 505. This time I've put a slightly shorter time frame. This is when she realizes she needs a drink and wants to go to the toilet. And so she heads back to the Mears entrance, and we know that she drives past the camera at 1:15. So that's that portion. She then is off the trails for a while. I've left that out actually here. And then she parks back at the Mears entrance at about 1:47. That's because the timestamp is 1:46 at the Hoosier Harvest store. And then, as we know, she walks to the Monon High Bridge. She sees Bridge Guy. I think she may see Bridge Guy a little bit earlier than that, but who knows? And then she sees Abby and Libby as she walks back to the trail split. In isolation, none of these timelines are particularly useful. We're going to look at the combination of them in a minute and sort of understand how they work, but that's kind of a rough timeline for Betsy Blair. So let's get to the four girls. Who do they see? So this is Brie Wilbur, Riley Voorhees, Isabella Voorhees, and Anna Spath or Spath. I don't know how to say their names. But yeah, the four girls. So we get varying statements from the girls that testified. So we've got Brie Wilbur and Riley Voorhees are the two that testified at trial, and their statements do vary in terms of who they saw. Three of the four girls say they saw Bridge Guy. We don't know about the fourth one because Isabella doesn't seem to have ever been interviewed, or at least she didn't testify. We don't have a statement from her. We do have Anna's information in the PCA, and we do know that she was interviewed in 2017 from the Discovery map as well. So yeah, here's just the questions again, like, do we have Brie Wilbur's 2017 interview available? We've got here Anna, memory contamination. We're going to talk about this in a minute when we look at the memory research. But basically, when you've got varying people in a group who've seen the same thing, there's going to be contamination based on speaking to each other about it. She wasn't used as a witness. I'm curious why. And yeah, Isabella, as we've already mentioned, was not used at all. Their movements around the trails, though, are well corroborated by photo evidence. So again, we've got time-stamped photos here that we can somewhat rely upon to kind of trace or track their movements. So just some discrepancies between the girls. So Rayleigh says she saw a man walking a dog on the way to the Monon High Bridge, and he was walking towards Freedom Bridge. She says only one person was seen on the way back, and that was Bridge Guy. And this is where she differs from Bree, because Bree says she saw a few people on the way to the Monon High Bridge and she saw one or two people on the way back. So we can see here that Bree seems to have seen more people than Rayleigh. And there's a discrepancy there. Not unusual, because our memory for passers-by is not great, but you can see, therefore, though, the importance of having multiple people's recollections so that we could kind of get a full picture of who was actually there that day. In terms of the descriptions of Bridge Guy, of course, there are some deviations. Again, that's not really that abnormal based on memory research either. So yeah, it's not overly concerning. There are certainly some similarities there as well. So we've got things like height, we've got what they were wearing or what Bridge Guy was wearing. But we have things that are similar. They all seem to be saying that this is a younger person, certainly younger than Rick Allen. They are talking about hair. Again, Rick Allen does not have hair. He has a buzz cut. They're talking about height being, not super tall, but certainly not shorter than they are, which Rick Allen would be. And the clothing varies, but again, to me, that's not super concerning, because I can't remember the clothing of people around me that I'm passing. I can't even probably remember, the clothing of other family members some days. Another thing that they all said was that this man had a creepy or a concerning aura about him, and he basically gave them the creeps. And also they all indicated that he was overdressed as well. So he stood out to all three of them, and understandably, because he has the features of a sort of person that would stand out, somebody who looks a little bit more menacing or concerning, somebody who looks more imposing, because I think they also said muscular, someone who's dressed in a way that doesn't make sense for the environment. That's more likely to be noticed than somebody who's just a unassuming average passerby. So this is the four girls timeline that I've again roughly mapped out from their testimony. So arriving at Freedom Bridge around 12:25. So that's what the photos show. Walking to the trail split approximately by 12:33. Walking from the trail split to the Monon High Bridge. And then they have a photo on the bridge, and then they describe that they went under the Monon High Bridge to the water's edge. So that wasn't the 505, but this was just them following a sort of made up trail, I suppose, down, I believe it's a right-hand side of the start of the bridge. So they were down there for a bit, and then they come back up. They take a photo at the bench around 1:26. It's one of the benches on the way back. Just going back to the map. We've got here, so one of these benches here, I believe it might be this one, because they say it was kind of quite close to the meres. And then we've got, so then we've got them walking back between the bench and being seen on the small bridge on the way back to town. We've got a period of about 15, 20 minutes, which is when they may have seen Bridge Guy. At which point within that, it's hard to know, I believe. One of them, I think it might have been Rayleigh, said initially that they saw Bridge Guy at about 2:15. So that wasn't correct. That was later sort of debunked, I suppose. But I guess it sort of suggests then that they possibly saw Bridge Guy on the later end of this interval here. Okay, so important point here now, because all of that's kind of boring, to be honest. But now let's get into the analysis of this all. So this actually could explain why Betsy Blair did not see the four girls and the four girls did not see Betsy Blair, because they would actually only pass each other when they were on the small bridge, as in they wouldn't actually pass each other. That'd be the only time that Betsy Blair would see them. Because if you compare the two timelines, and I'm going to pull up the timelines along with Rick's in a minute, you'll see that based on these timelines that gosh, how many times am I going to say timeline today? That the girls are actually walking past Betsy Blair when she's on the 505, so they wouldn't see her. And Betsy Blair is walking back to the Monon High Bridge when the girls are down by the creek, so she wouldn't see them. So this accounts for the 4 girls and Betsy Blair being on the trails at the same time and not seeing each other. Now, the contentious issue here is the 505 trail. How long is Betsy Blair on it? Because if she only walks half the trail, then this timeline falls apart. So that's where I'm kind of still not sure. It's a tight timeline. And so there are points where it could potentially be debunked, I suppose, if she did really only walk. Yes, Shivita, you'll be very drunk. I need to stop saying timeline. My goodness, it's so annoying. I'm getting annoyed at myself, I guess, because I've thought about this stuff so many times. So now as I'm saying it out loud, I'm just like, boring. I hope it's not boring, guys. It does feel a bit boring. Let's skip to the more exciting part, which is, like I said, the memory research and understanding. Oh, wait a minute. I think there's a phone ringing. No, it stopped. Good. Okay. So, yeah, I want to get to the more interesting part where we're actually talking about the contentious stuff rather than just labeling out boring timestamps. Okay, Bridge Guy. I'm not going to go over this. I just added it to the presentation for anyone who doesn't know when Bridge Guy was there. I think everybody in here does understand. Abby and Libby, again, anyone who is in here probably already knows their timeline, so I'm not going to go over that. That was just for completeness. Okay. Now it gets a bit more interesting. Let's look at Rick's own words, because this is where we can plot out Rick's timeline. How do we get Rick into this? Peggy, I'm just reading what you're saying. It narrows at a certain point. Yeah, I think so. And I was watching Rick Snay walking the trails with his dogs and his wife, and it seemed that that's about the 6 minutes in mark. So yeah, I think that's probably the halfway point. However, because it was winter and it wouldn't have been as bushy, she may have gone further. I don't know. Hard to know. Okay, let's read Rick's own words, because this is the stuff that I think is most contentious, and this is also the stuff that helped me to finally kind of come to the conclusion that Rick Allen is innocent. It was the interrogation videos. My cat is now looking over the screen. She's very interested in this too. Okay, no, she's going. All right. So let's read this. These are literally copied out of the transcript of the interview one, which was the 13th of October, 2022. So Rick says, and I could have, you know what, I could have actually just like used the clip of Rick talking rather than you hearing me talk. But anyway, sorry guys, I'm not that technical. So exactly what time it was that I got there that day, I just remember walking down the trail and I told him that when I was approaching the trailhead, I guess it is what I call it, there was 3 girls walking off the trail. And I just remember it looking like one of them was probably watching, not babysitting, but watching over the other 2 because they looked a little younger. He says they looked very similar. I don't know if they were sisters or whatever, but the other one didn't necessarily, but I remember seeing them walking off the trail head and I didn't really see anybody. I walked down, like I said, I looked at the water, I walked back and I sat. I mean, somebody could walk behind me, I guess, but I sat on the bench that overlooks the... Right, so I'm not going to post photos on here, but I did Google the Voorhees sisters to get a picture of how they look, and indeed those 2 girls do look alike. There were some pictures from Carroll County kind of media of them, nothing related to the case, but if you look at Rayleigh and Isabel particularly, I couldn't find Anna, but those 2, they definitely looked similar. Just going to read the chat for a minute. Peggy says, I wonder if Betsy still does that walk. I can go around and follow her. Yeah, Peggy, I would love to see. Yeah, would have been. I just wish we could understand what she did that day. And yeah. And Charles, you're saying I can identify Tidy Allen as a possible suspect without all the base evidence, without his tip, and without the interrogations. Okay. Well, you're welcome to your opinion, Charles. You know that I'm not going to agree with you. But so yeah, what he's describing there. Now, no, this is where people say that I'm now following Nick McClelland's timeline. I am not. I will absolutely clarify that. I do not believe Rick Allen is guilty. I do not believe the timeline and the evidence that I'm showing in this presentation today suggests he's guilty at all. And I think it's a nuance that we need to look at here. I may be agreeing with points that the state is saying, but I'm not agreeing with their interpretation of those points. So what I'm saying here, though, is that we've got two quotes from him saying that the girls looked like they were potentially siblings. And when you see the two girls, they absolutely look like siblings. And I believe it comes up later when he talks about one of them having long dark hair. That absolutely matches the description of Riley Voorhees. Why did he see three? We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so Rick's own words. Again, here we've got him talking about the cars he sees. So he says, I sat there for a few minutes and left. And like I said, there were a couple of vehicles. I may have told him the exact makes. I'm not sure. I just remember one was like a sedan, and I think maybe one was an SUV. I'm not sure. So Rick appears to be referring to two cars at the Mears entrance because that's the area that he's consistently talking about walking past and seeing cars at. And the only time that we're aware of is, that there are two cars within that time frame is when Betsy Blair and Kelsey German are parked there. And it's only a 1 to 2 minute crossover, and it's at approximately 1:48. Betsy Blair drives an SUV. Kelsey German drives a sedan. There are later cars on the trail where there are multiple cars, but I don't believe that SUV sedan configuration is matches any of those, because I think Dan McCain or Dave McCain, I never remember which of the McCain brothers it is, drives a hatchback. Dave Riley, I believe is his name, the dog walker, he drives a truck. There may be some sedans. I don't believe there's any SUVs. I think the problem here is that there's multiple cars parked there later in the day, and we also don't expect that Rick is there at those times anyway, because that is post-abduction. So as far as I could find, there were the only time that there were two cars at the farmer's entrance that day in that time frame, not that day, but in that time frame was when Betsy Blair was parked there and Kelsey German pulls in to drop the girls off. We don't know who else was there earlier at around the 12 mark. During Betsy Blair's first two loops, there may have been another car that pulled in at some point. I'm not saying that there definitely wasn't, but this definitely sort of matches and seems kind of likely to be what Rick's referring to. So some more of Rick's own words. Good old Liggett says, so then you get on the trail and say you saw three girls. Where was it where you saw the three girls? And Rick says, they were up around the trail. I mean, I didn't interact with them. It was up around the trailhead somewhere. But I'd say they were leaving, yeah. I'm assuming they were leaving, or they came from down where those cars parked and they were heading back that way. I don't know. So the cars that he's referring to throughout the interview are the cars parked at the Farmers Mears entrance, because he says there's no cars parked where he was parked. So whether he was parked at the CPS or at the Old Camden Road, he says there were no cars parked where he was parked. There was no other big car park around at that point. So the cars he's referring to are the Farmers Mears entrance cars. So if he says he runs into the girls and they were going back to where the cars were parked, he says he crosses paths with them head on, then that suggests he crosses paths with them when they are on the stretch from the Monon High Bridge to the trail split, and he's going from the trail split to the Monon High Bridge, because there is no other point at which he would be crossing with girls that would be headed towards those parked cars. Does that make sense? So I don't know if that kind of makes sense to everybody, but that's how I make sense of it. If he's walking directly facing them, and they're walking towards those cars, and he's either coming back from the Monon High Bridge and walking back to his car when he sees the girls headed in that direction. That doesn't really make sense because we don't know anyone headed in that direction around those time frames. And he also says they're going off the trails. Otherwise, he would say, well, they might have been heading to the Monon High Bridge if he's passing them at another point. I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit hard to explain. I probably should bring the map back up, actually. Let's go back. I should have kept the map in a separate document so I don't have to keep flicking through. Here we go. Okay, so he says this is where the cars are parked. He's talking about the girls that he saw, Charles, the girls that Rick saw, these 3 girls. He said that as he's walking, and he says the trailhead, which is this, but people refer to this as a trailhead too. I was reading Kelsey's testimony the other day, and she says we parked at the trailhead. This can also be considered a trailhead. Okay, so, and this was the new trailhead still at that time. So he says he's walking this way to the Monon High Bridge when he sees 3 girls, and he says they were leaving the trails and going back to where the cars were parked. This is where the cars are parked. So he can't have run into them here, because then, like my arrow's changing, I don't know if you guys can see that, then they would be heading that way. That's not where the cars are parked. He said there were no cars parked here or here, wherever he parked. So to me, in those statements, the trailhead he's referring to as the trail split. So this is approximately here where he sees those girls. So I know this is contentious, but it makes sense, doesn't it? Does anyone else kind of agree that makes sense based on what he's actually saying? So let's go back. So this is my timeline for Rick Allen, and this is, as I said, the thing that cops me lots of flack. I've been called a veiled guilter. I've had lots of mean things said about how I'm basically Nick McClelland's little buddy, and I'm clearly not, because if I were Nick McClelland's buddy, I wouldn't be posting as prolifically as I do about this case. Because anyone who's watched me or listened to anything I've said in the past few months knows that I'm staunchly a supporter of Rick Allen. In the earlier days, I was unsure, but I was certainly never someone who was convinced of Rick Allen's guilt. Okay, so we won't talk too much about the parking situation. I'm going to do another video on cars and parking and things like that later, but he's either parked his car at the CPS or the Old Camden Road. Those are the 2 locations described in the interrogation or the interview. So my time frame is aligning with what he initially told the tip line, which was 1 o'clock. So I say if he parks his car around 1 to 1:10 and starts walking to the trailhead, he walks from the trailhead to the trail split at about 1:10 to 1:20. He doesn't see Betsy Blair because she's already walking ahead of him and leaves the trails at 1:15 to go to the library to do her toilet and drink break. At 1:20, he passes the 4 girls. Maybe he sees 3 of them near the trail split. They don't notice him because they're 4 girls having fun, chatting on Snapchat, and he's just an average dad walking past. He's not a particularly salient feature in the environment because he's a fairly small man. He's probably dressed in fairly dull clothes, and he's quiet, and he's just walking along. He's also got his phone, and so they don't notice him. We'll talk about how research supports this in a minute. He then walks to the Monon High Bridge, and he looks down at the fish. You can see fish. We know that's been confirmed. And then he walks back to the 505 bench by about 1:35. There is no body between the Monon High Bridge and the 505 bench in that time frame because the 4 girls have gone. Betsy Blair's off the trails. He sits on the 505 bench and he watches his stocks. So he's got head down and he's looking at his stocks for about a few minutes because he does say it's a few minutes only. And he does say, if we go back to his words, where did I put it? Here, somebody could walk behind me, I guess. I sat on the bench that overlooks the water. So who walked behind him in that time frame? Potentially Bridge Guy, and even potentially Betsy Blair when she comes back for her second loop as well. So he then gets up at around the time when Kelsey is dropping Abby and Libby off. And so he sees the two cars at the Mears entrance and he walks away. He walks in the opposite direction, back to the trailhead, back to his car, and then he leaves. This is tight because it really means he needs to get up at the exact couple of minutes that Kelsey's parked there. And that is definitely a very tight time frame. But coincidences happen. Hi, Joshua Jackson. Thanks for joining. So realistically, this timeline works. This timeline allows for Betsy Blair and the girls to not see each other. It allows for Betsy Blair and Rick Allen to not see each other. And it allows for Rick Allen to see the girls, but the girls not see him. But let's look a little bit deeper. So I have the comparison. Oh, I don't know how to pull it up. Give me one sec, guys. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll be back in a second. Okay, I'm back. So, oh, I've still got the wrong thing. Give me another second. Sorry, guys. Okay, guys, I'm figuring it out. I can't share Canva on the screen for some reason, so I've had to make myself another link. Hi, Big Fish, Small Pond. Thanks for joining. Goodness, guys, I'm so disorganized. I have ADHD and I have not taken my meds this morning because it's my day at home and I was bludging around and forgot to take them. And I really should have taken them because now we're seeing the consequences of that. So, okay, let's see. We got it, finally. Okay, so now add that to the stage. Here we go. Okay, so I am not great at making this look wonderful. I know that Amy on Case by Case, gosh, wow, the way that she presents the timeline with all of the sort of like lines and stuff, it's so technical and kudos to her because I wish I could do that, but I'm not very good with this stuff. So my presentation of it is pretty poor, but I hope we can still kind of follow it. I put this through ChatGPT and ChatGPT was like, no, you should do it this way and that way. And I was like, I don't have the staying power to sit and fiddle around with Canva or any other program to do this. So you've just got plain boring text from me, but I will talk about it. I'm good at talking. So, you know, that's something I can do. I don't know. Maybe I'm not good at talking. I do talk, though, a lot. Okay, so if we compare these timelines, and I didn't even label them, so that's kind of dumb as well. I just realized that. So this here, the first one is the 4 girls. Here we've got Rick Allen, and here we've got Betsy Blair. Good on me for not labeling them. That's silly, isn't it? Okay, I'll relabel them and I will post this link up on the community page so you guys can have a look at this as well. This is actually an upgrade on what I initially did when I first was trying to plot the timeline. It was just literally scribbled out, written notes on my kids' scrapbook paper. So this is an upgrade, guys. Okay, anyway, enough of me mocking my silliness. Let's get to looking at this. So You can see now the points where all three would be on the trail and why they wouldn't see each other. Okay, so you've got here, if we've got the overlap between Betsy Blair and the four girls, you can see now that when Betsy Blair is on the 505 loop, which is the only part of the trail that's completely obscured, we've got the girls walking to the trail split. And by the time they're past the trail split, that's when Betsy Blair can come back out and go to Freedom Bridge. Now, I know this sounds like people playing hide and seek, and I'm not suggesting that they are, but what you can see from this is that it's very much possible, according to, I guess, the overall descriptions they have of their movements that day, and also according to the trail layout. So she could absolutely, hi, Just James, nice to see you. She could conceivably have been on that 505 loop while they were walking to the bridge, which is why they didn't cross paths. So again, I wish I could pull back up the map. You know what, guys? I will do another video at some point where I actually just put the timeline and the map next to each other. I probably should have figured this out and thought about this when I was thinking about how to present it. But anyway, and when you put them together next to each other, you'll see this better. Like I said, I will do a short video just for that later if anyone wants to watch that. But so, yeah, that's the only crossover point of the four girls and Betsy Blair being on the trail. And that explains why they don't see each other. We also then can explain why Rick Allen doesn't see Betsy Blair and she doesn't see him, because he's now entering as she's pretty much on her way out. So she has gone by the time he gets to the trail split, and they don't see each other. They don't cross paths again until she returns to the trails, but he's sitting on the bench at that point. And we'll talk about the bench in a minute, but that means, again, that she could kind of walk past, not notice him, and he could be sitting on the bench and not notice her. So here we've got a pretty solid explanation of how people don't see each other without anyone needing to be a ghost. Okay. Then we've got the four girls. So we can see that this kind of marries up quite well with him seeing those girls as he was walking towards the bridge, and then potentially not seeing him as they're walking back from having a fun time under the bridge at the water, looking at their phones, fiddling around, chatting. And then they leave so they wouldn't see Rick again. Okay, so this is the comparison. If we add Bridge Guy and Abby and Libby into it too, we've got Bridge Guy potentially walking to the bridge while Rick is sitting on the bench. Again, probably not noticing. We're going to talk about the bench in a minute. And we've got Betsy Blair and Bridge Guy and Abby and Libby all overlapping. Okay, I'm going to go back to the main presentation now, so bear with me. Rayleigh sees the dog walking guy, I believe, Big Fish. I keep getting confused. Rayleigh and Bree's statements, they kind of overlap, but I believe she sees a guy walking dog as they're walking towards the bridge. And that's kind of a confusing one because, yeah, we don't know of any man walking a dog on the bridge that day. And it's unusual that that person's never been located. But Bree does say that she sees one or two people on the way back from the bridge, and she also says she sees a few people walking to the bridge. So she does describe seeing some other people too. We just don't have any details, and that's what's so tough about this. Bree particularly, I'd love to know more about the people she saw as she was walking back from the bridge, but potentially her 2017 interview is one of the ones that was lost, so not very helpful. Okay, now I'm just going to go back to the main presentation again. So bear with me again as I figure this out. This is way clunkier than I thought it would be. Okay. Screen. And I'm mindful of the time because I actually have a telehealth patient today at 11 o'clock and it's 10:24. So I got lots to still get through. So I'm going to try and get to the important stuff now. Okay. Right. So the 505 bench. So have a look at this picture here. I've literally put an arrow here. I probably shouldn't have put the arrow there because then I could have said, can you see the bench? It's so hard to see, right? It's literally there, tucked behind a tree. So this picture, I believe, is around April 2017. I think this is the video I was talking about before. And you can see that this is the view as you're walking towards the trail split. That's what the bench looks like. right? So understandably, it's not directly on the main trail. It's a little bit off. I kind of timed someone walking to it. I think it was, I don't know, one of the videos I timed them, and it's about 10 to 15 seconds off the main trail. I went out and did some field studies myself the other day with my dog, and we walked around some of the trails in my area, and I literally found a bench and walked 10 to 15 seconds away from it, and then sort of calculated that distance. That distance is enough distance that it's hard to see exactly who's on the bench, and it's also hard to hear from the bench, whether you're on the bench or the person away from the bench, to hear someone else, particularly if that person's just sitting there quietly and the other person's just walking quietly. So this bench, I think, is super, super key. We know this is the bench that Rick sits on because he himself says he sits on that bench, and we know that bench overlooks the water, and we know that bench could be obscured from the main trail. So somebody could be walking down here and not see him, or at least he wouldn't see them. Bit harder to reconcile someone walking up here and not seeing him because it would be directly in front, but it's still far enough away that could absolutely explain why Betsy Blair may not have seen him if she was walking back in and going that way. Interestingly as well, the view from this area here between the bench and the trail split back to the farmer's entrance is pretty good too. So you can actually see you could actually see the cars parked there. Look to the right, those trees, wolves hide. Right. I mean, look, the trees here would definitely obscure it. Apparently, actually, and we're going to come to this a bit later, there is research about people's memory and attention in wooded areas. And you can see this is quite a bland scene here. And I mean, if Rick Allen's wearing bland clothes, which I would kind of guess he was because, he was a middle-aged man, then he's not going to be super noticeable. He is a smaller stature guy as well. He's looking at his phone on his stock. So he's going to be bent down, not bent down, but kind of hunched over. And yeah, 100% people look at their phones. Betsy Blair's clearly a bit of a tech person. She had a Fitbit in 2017, so it was early days for Fitbits. So, she was probably on her phone. She just got on the trails, this is 30 seconds into her walk, and she's headed that way to the left. So she's kind of glancing up maybe a few times, looks and heads this way. Even if she noticed him, he wouldn't have been a salient feature of her walk that day. And again, we don't know what she noticed because no one knows what she said in 2017, because I do believe her video was one of the ones that was lost as well. Okay, so this leaves us with the 3 key minutes. So I have tried to really decode what happens in those 3 minutes where Betsy Blair arrives, Kelsey German arrives, and then Kelsey German leaves. The only time where there are 2 cars that are at the Mears entrance at the same time during that earlier time frame. So we've got the timestamps. I thought you were talking about a wolf. That's why I was like, I did not understand what you were saying, Shimmy. Okay, so you were making a serious point. I thought you were trying to make a joke about a wolf, but there you go. So what we've got here is, Betsy Blair, the timestamp for the Hoosier Harvest Store, so it's 1:46. So she would arrive at the Mears entrance about 30 seconds later. It's really just a pull-in and you park, so it's not a complicated parking spot. And then we've got her walking onto the trail. So she got out of her car pretty quickly, give her another 20 seconds, and then she starts walking to the trail split. And she would already be at the trail split probably by the time Kelsey German arrives. Now, again, I've kind of plotted when Kelsey German arrives based on her timestamp. We know that she goes past the Hoosier Harvest Store camera after dropping the girls. So it's got to be before that 1:49 mark. So if Kelsey German arrives in that sort of 30-second time frame, she just pulls in. She literally does a drive by dropping the girls off. They jump out. I think Libby goes back or kind of ducks into the back to get a jumper, and then they leave. That's about a 30-second to a minute that they're there. So if Rick Allen gets up from the bench in that time frame, Betsy Blair's already walked past the trail split, and he might turn, he might see the 2 cars, and then he walks to the trail split and he just keeps going. He turns left and walks. So he doesn't necessarily see anything more. Kelsey drives away, and she drives past the Hoosier Harvest store. It is super tight. I'm not pretending that this is so obvious and that this is a definite sort of understanding of the timeline, but it makes sense. And the reason I think it makes sense as well is because maybe the car pulling in, the noise of the car pulling in, or Betsy Blair sort of rustling on the leaves is what kind of catches Rick's attention. He thinks, oh, I've got to get up, I better go. Right now, he may not register that as a sort of detailed memory, but that's how our minds work, right? We literally hear something and it triggers us and we're like, oh, yep, up, let's get going. If we look at Betsy Blair's Fitbit data again as well, I'm kind of really analysing this, and I'm not saying this is an exact science, but what you'll notice is that it seems that she takes longer to get out of the car on the first trip than she does on the second. And the reason I say that is we know she arrives at around 12:02, I think 12:03 on the first trip, and you can see that first bar is actually probably about half, just over half of the other bars, which suggests she's only really walking for about half of that section. They're 15-minute sections, so she's walking for about 7 minutes of that section. So that kind of means she probably took a little bit longer on that first drive, park, and get out. Whereas the second time round, you'll see this bar is only about 10% shorter than the other bars. So she arrives, this is a 1:45 to 2 bar. She arrives at 1:46. It seems like she must start walking pretty quickly. So I'm thinking that she jumped out, she hopped out and got going. Sorry, I'm rushing a bit now, guys, because I'm running out of time. But I'm hoping that this is still all making sense. And definitely go back and look at the slides more closely if you want to understand it a bit further. That's why I wrote everything on the slides, because I knew I'd probably garble some of it when I'm talking about it. But looking at this Fitbit data, it's hard to sort of get timestamps from it, of course. But what you're seeing there is that this 15-minute bar, she's not active for this arrow keeps changing. She's not active for the entire time because it's about half the length of the other active bars. Whereas this one, where she's arriving really at the beginning of that segment, it's nearly fully active like all the others. So it suggests she's really not wasting time in the car, which kind of goes back to this idea here where it might even be literally 20 seconds. Time yourself. Like this stuff, it's interesting because me doing my little field studies the other day, I was timing like when I drive and I stop and I get out of the car, or when I'm picking up my kids or dropping off my kids places. It's like when you time it, it really is literally a few seconds a lot of the time. So what about the earlier timeline? So this is a timeline that most people who support Rick Allen stick to. It's the 12 to 1:30 timeline, because that's what he said in the interview. And I understand that. I looked into this timeline initially and thought this was the reason he was cleared. But subsequently, when you look at all of the crossovers that have to occur for that to be accurate, you start to look at it differently. Right? Because then we're expecting Betsy Blair doesn't see the four girls don't see Betsy Blair. Now, that could be explained again by my descriptions around Betsy Blair being on the 505 while the girls walk past, the girls being under the bridge when Betsy gets back to the bridge. But then we're now adding another person into that narrow slot. And where's Rick Allen then? There was no way that I could help make that make sense without somebody having to have run into somebody else. And then we're seeing not just one person missing an interaction with someone, we're seeing multiple parties missing, if that makes sense. So I know I'm saying that the four girls didn't see Rick saw the four girls, but for the earlier timeline to work, we're saying, more than that is happening. So in that, we've got one group missing one man. But in the earlier timeline, we've got multiple groups missing each other, if that makes sense. And when I say groups, I just mean like even Rick Allen is his own group. Betsy Blair's her own group. So if we think about the four girls are a group, they kind of count as this sort of one individual in a way. It's not accurate 100% to say that, because of course 3 or 4 girls are going to notice slightly different things. But I think it just makes more sense that 4 teenagers miss one man than a man misses a woman and the woman misses the man and the woman misses the girls and the girls miss the woman. Anyway, let's get to the research to see whether what I'm saying makes sense. So, memory research, all of the following research is backed by empirical studies. I'm not going to put all the citations in because, as you can see, my slides are already overloaded, but we can certainly I can certainly send you links to them if you're interested in learning more. So, let's look at memory research in general, and then we're going to look at some specifics in relation to this case. So, timing really matters. I'm just reading what she'd be saying. It would have been great if law enforcement didn't wait 5 years to follow up with the only one man who came to the, yeah, exactly, right? I mean, ridiculous that they waited so long. And they did a short interview with him once and then they forgot about him. You know, so much gets forgotten and lost, right, with law enforcement. I mean, if that happened in my clinic, if our receptionist said, oh, I lost a referral for someone, they'd be like really in trouble. It'd be a big deal. You can't just lose things. And this is like a murder investigation and we don't care that they've lost things. Anyway, so timing matters. Memory fades really quickly. People's recall of events degrades over time. Details will blur. And the problem is confidence often still maintains a high level even when the accuracy declines. And this is particularly true for peripheral details, things like clothing, car, timing, bystanders that weren't particularly memorable, right? So the problem here is that the memory is going to degrade really, really quickly. What we know is that when people do things like lineups and photo IDs early on, the science is now showing that can be really accurate, but it needs to be done straight away. And with each subsequent lineup or with each subsequent time frame, that deteriorates. We know that there's something called memory contamination, and this is huge when it comes to this case. So talking with other people, seeing news coverage, being questioned in certain ways can reshape a memory. Memory can be reshaped by suggestion, questioning, people's own assumptions. And over months or years, what feels clear can actually include distortions and gaps. We can incorporate outside details and not even recognize that we're doing that. And this is relevant for Rick too, because, I mean, the way that he's questioned during the interrogations was certainly inserting some ideas into his mind that later when he unraveled and decompensated in jail, potentially fed some of those confession narratives that he was saying that were basically a false kind of memory or false ideas that he'd started to kind of believe about what happened when he was unwell. Okay, so yeah, considering the lost interviews from 2017, if that's true, we have major issues here because those key witness testimonies are based on their memories 3 years after the crime. 3 years. Like, we're not even just talking a few days. We're talking 3 years. Now, if you think about something that happened 3 years ago, and even if it's something fairly major, do you have a good memory of that? I certainly don't. I mean, even big things that happen in our lives that have that salience factor, we can still forget a lot of detail. Attention is limited, so people only notice a fraction of what's happening around them. So if they're walking, chatting, thinking about something else, they may not encode background people or events at all. So this is called inattentional bias, blindness. So even obvious things can be missed if attention's elsewhere. There's a really cool study that we're going to talk about in a minute that really indicates just how much this effect is. Actually, let's just go to it because it's really interesting. Here we go. So there's a study that was done in 2009 called the unicycling clown study. So people were walking while on their phone, and they basically had this person dressed up as a clown on a unicycle go past, and only 25% of phone users noticed the clown. So only 1 in 4 people noticed a clown on a unicycle driving past them or riding past them. About half of the people walking on their own noticed it. About 61% of music listeners did. So that's interesting. Obviously, listening to music isn't quite as distracting. In fact, maybe because listening to music, like, it kind of frees up your attention to kind of look around. And 71% of walkers in pairs did. And I think the reason for that is because when you've got 2 people, one person might go, oh my gosh, look at that. And then the other person notices too. So Divided attention severely impairs what we encode from our surroundings. So even noticeable or novel events can be missed. And in fact, routine passers-by are among the least well-remembered stimuli in everyday memory research. And that makes sense because, again, on my little field study the other day with my dog walking around the trails in my area, I was actually deliberately trying to notice people because I was literally thinking about how good memory is. And even then, I can only remember a few of the passers-by and certainly didn't have a great amount of detail about them. The one person I remembered and I could describe best was a little child. And the only reason I could remember that little child is because he looked so similar to the little sibling of one of my son's best friends. So I was truly paying attention. I wasn't on my phone other than taking some pictures and stuff. I wasn't with another person, and I was deliberately saying, let me see how much I can remember from walking on this trail right now. And the trail that I was walking on would have had about a similar sort of level of people around to what would have been on the High Bridge trails that day. Okay, so let's go back. Attention is limited. Stress narrows focus. So high stress or fear can improve recall of most central details. So someone creepy, for example, but peripheral details like how many people were on the trails, what people were wearing, timing, those sorts of things are often lost. Forgetting faces. So distinctive versus average faces. Distinctive or emotionally salient faces resist the forgetting curve better, but average faces fade faster. And so, like if I'm walking on trails, everyone will remember me because I've got such a wonderfully beautiful face. Jokes, guys. But what I'm saying here is if somebody looks like your average person, then you are not going to really notice them, right? And this is not any offense to Rick Allen, but he's just an average guy. He looks like an average dad, right? And so him walking on the trails, he's not going to be particularly distinctive to anyone. Versus Bridge Guy, who is distinctive both because the stress effect, they all described him as creepy and his demeanor as being concerning, but also he was wearing clothes that covered his face. He looked overdressed. There were lots of aspects about him that made him far more distinctive than Rick Allen, walking around, probably shoulders hunched. He's a little guy with, with depression as well. So potentially, his posture, his low self-esteem is going to also reflect in how noticeable he is. We've got confidence doesn't equal accuracy. We've already talked about that. Brief or partial views reduce accuracy. So if we only glimpse someone in passing, especially in a wooded or cluttered space, memory is much more error prone. Moving figures blend with the background and people might not realize how incomplete their perception was. So again, this kind of refers back to the bench stuff. I notice I'm losing people. I hope it's not too boring, guys. I hope this makes sense. I know I'm going on and on. So yeah, apologies if it's a bit boring. Timing shifts. So memory for when something happens fades faster than memory for what happened. So the further back in time, the fuzzier the spacing. So events from last month might be remembered as more spread out, but when we're thinking of 5 years ago, things are more compressed. And again, this is relevant for Rick's change of statement in terms of timing. It's not something suspicious, but it's also not necessarily accurate. It's more that things have become sort of condensed and squished into a shorter time frame, which is why now he thinks he was at the trails earlier. Unreliable number recall. People are generally poor at estimating crowd size in natural dynamic settings. We get the gist, not the exact count. So again, this is the explanation of 4 versus 3 or 3 versus 4. Environmental challenges. So in wooded or cluttered areas, partial views, movement, distractions increase the chance of missing someone or double counting. Similarity effect. So when individuals look alike, witnesses may merge them together in memory, leading to undercounts or confusion. So again, could explain why Rick sees 3 girls, not 4. Novelty, our memory system emphasizes novel, relevant, or emotionally salient things. So routine details are filtered out, and that's so our brain can be efficient. We can't possibly take in everything that we're seeing or noticing. So just a few more everyday setting research findings around memory, so incidental memory. We remember stuff we weren't trying to remember. Our brain just does not store the details from routine activities, particularly unless it's noteworthy. Again, this is because the brain needs to be efficient, so it's really much more attuned for novelty and things that are either very different, obvious, outside what we usually see and notice, or threatening. And an everyday example, so brief, uneventful interactions, like a stranger asking for directions, are often forgotten within minutes. There's another study, I believe, where the person answering someone's question when they're asking for instructions changes midway through the interaction and people don't notice. So there are lots of studies like this. So ordinary passers-by in routine contexts like the trails are unlikely to be encoded in any lasting detail, which is why even in 2017, the memory wouldn't have been great. But if we're now looking at 2020, the memory is really not going to be particularly useful. So the common doubts regarding the timeline, basically I'm using the evidence that we've just talked about to answer some of these issues. So the first thing people say is Rick saw 3 girls, not 4. Well, we remember the gist of groups. We often miscount small groups. Because it's just a glance, really, and people in the periphery can get crowded out. So, like, yeah, I mean, if Bree was behind the others, if she was in front of the others, if they were huddled together, if she was taking a photo from a distance, there might be various reasons that Rick only saw 3 girls, not 4. So yeah, we can completely miss people right in front of us. So again, this is the studies that I was talking about before, like when we swap people mid-conversation. We've got this gorilla suit in a basketball game. It's another interesting study. So missing one member of a group is not super uncommon. And in this case, Bree was the one who wasn't related to the others. I don't know what Anna looks like, but I was saying before that the 2 Voorhees sisters definitely do, to me, look alike. They do look related. But interestingly, the different person isn't always noticed. So being the odd one out doesn't guarantee attention either. So just really, I'm mindful of time. I've only got another 10 minutes, so I'm just going to kind of race through this, but you can read all of this stuff in more detail. There is plenty of information through memory research that could explain why he saw only 3 of the 4 girls. Now, I know this sounds like I'm saying he's guilty. I'm not. So anyone joining midway through, I don't believe Rick saw the girls at the trailhead. I do not believe he's bridge guy. I'm suggesting that he walked past the girls earlier in the walk and in their walk. And so he saw them well before they saw bridge guy. They just didn't really notice him. So here's our next thing. The 4 girls didn't see Richard Allen. They only saw bridge guy. So first of all, we don't know that because Bree Wilbur does say she saw 1 or 2 other people as they walked back from the Monon High Bridge. So Rick could have been one of them. As I've explained before, attention's divided. These girls are with their friends, hanging out, having fun, right? So of course they're not going to notice every single detail around them when they're taking photos or on Snapchat, they're chatting. So this would reduce them noticing strangers that pass, particularly a stranger that is just your average dad, right? He doesn't look particularly obvious to them. So stress and salience narrows focus, but Rick Allen probably wouldn't have evoked stress in them. He's not somebody who seems like some sort of imposing person walking past. Teenagers are definitely more susceptible to suggestion as well. So they could also have had their accounts shaped by each other. So if one person said, I didn't see anyone else, then the others might go, oh, maybe we didn't see anyone else either. I guess as well, one of the other things we notice with teenagers is they're more likely to recognize or have memory for people who they see that are more similar in age to them. And so Rick Allen was not at all similar in age to them, but Bridge Guy, it seems, possibly was as well. Because they're saying he was in his 20s or 30s. Yes, they're teenagers, but that's much closer in age to them than Rick Allen. They remembered Bridge Guy again. I'm really rushing now just because I don't have a lot of time, and I also know that there aren't as many people in here anyway. So I'm just going through this quickly. We can go in more detail another time if we would like to. But yeah, Bridge Guy Oh, yes, of course you can ask a question, Chibi. I'll wait for your question. Oh, I'll be done really soon because I've literally got a patient in like 10 minutes. So yeah, I'm going to finish up really soon. And if we don't finish the presentation today, that's totally fine. We can come back to it. Oh, that's very sweet. That's very sweet. Yeah, I'm actually thinking because I do need to get ready for my client. I might come back to this. I feel like we spent so much time talking about the actual timeline and it wasn't a super efficient discussion. So I might actually come back to this because I feel like I don't want to miss the most important things. So I'm not going to go through all of this stuff now. We'll go back to it. But I guess what I wanted to say, I guess, just to sum up, I guess, what we're talking about today, Rick's timeline being the later timeline does not make him guilty. It matches a lot of what he says, but it is also absolutely in line with him being innocent. He's sitting on this bench while things are going on behind him. He doesn't see that. People don't see him. This bench is key here, guys. And if we see this bench as being, the reason why people don't see him on the trails that day, then yeah, you've got to, I really think this needs to be considered. The 505 bench, the 505 trail too, as an explanation of why Betsy Blair isn't seen by the girls and doesn't see the girls. Have a look at that comparison timeline. Have a look at the bench. Look at some videos on YouTube. Do your own little field studies like I did, walking around in trails or in any area. Go for a walk and see what you really notice. Notice what 15 seconds distance really is and whether you would notice someone on the bench 15 seconds away from you and whether the person on the bench would notice you walking past them. I really want to do more of this research myself. Like I did this on my own the other day with my dog, so I need to take another companion out with me. Yeah. Thanks, guys. I'm sorry. I wasn't. I don't know. I feel like I'm a little bit cloudy this morning, and so I wasn't as much on fire as I wanted to be when talking about this because it's such an important point, and I don't want it to be dismissed because I have had my timeline dismissed by a lot of people. And the reason I present it is to actually offer a really compelling account of how Rick Allen could have been on the trails that day and not seen and why he's innocent. Because I can tell you that the timeline, people like Tom Webster and Gray Hughes, when they talk about the timeline, they can be very persuasive. And for somebody like myself who was on the fence early on, before I looked into this timeline myself and did all of this mapping out, that I literally fell for that. I fell for that story myself because I didn't know. I didn't know the layout of the trails. I didn't know the possibilities. And so, yeah, for a period there, I remember actually like calling it quits on the whole case because I'd been so excited thinking, I think Rick's innocent. I want to like be part of this, particularly the psychological aspects. And then I was like, no, he must be guilty. The timeline just doesn't work. And so this is why I offer this timeline, because I think offering timelines where we're trying to add people who are not confirmed on the trails, where we're trying to add extra paths that don't exist, when we're trying to change, distances between things, when we're trying to expect that Rick Allen is a ghost literally hovering through the trails, that doesn't help with credibility for the movement that we have here of trying to help an innocent man be released from jail. And so I really feel like this timeline that I'm suggesting here makes sense. It makes sense. It is not a prosecution timeline, but it does marry up all of the witness statements, the trail layout, the memory research, and logic. And it's believable, if you ask me. Yes, it's tight, but it's believable. And I think that memory research is important here because a lot of the people that tell me I'm wrong, and I'm always happy to be told I'm wrong because I have been wrong about lots of things. Oh, sorry. We have a visitor at the door, so the dog's gone barking. But all the people that tell me that I'm wrong, they say, but he said this, but they said this, but this. And it's like, yes, but memory research shows that we can't rely fully on everything someone says as being accurate. And so by presenting some of this memory research, I hope that it opens people's minds up a little bit to why we need to look at this through various layers, I guess. And the one skill I know that I have, I'm going to be proud of myself around this, is I am someone who's good at integrating and looking at layers and kind of putting them together and synthesizing them. And that's what I do in my work. And that's where I think my skills can come in, even though I may not have all of the technical skills of others when it comes to law enforcement, digital stuff, legal stuff. What I can do is synthesize and bring stuff together. And I think that's what I've done in this timeline. So I really urge you guys to have a closer look. I will post a link for the comparison timeline. And what I might do is either do another live or I'll record a slightly shorter video that just gets at the meat and bones of this, because I really want the key points to kind of come across rather than it be all of the expansive information that I've maybe shared today. But hopefully that sets the scene for future discussions about the timeline. Again, I really appreciate you guys. I better go get ready for my client. And thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting me. Please let me know if you think that the things that I've got wrong, or if you have other ideas. I'm totally open to collaboration at any point. If you want to know more about my thoughts as well, just have a look on the Delphi Mystery Reddit group. That's the one that I started, and I've put a lot of detail on there. My timeline has evolved since the earlier post, but there's a lot of similarity in what I said. Anyway, thanks, guys. Thank you, Shibby and Heavy, for being amazing mods and bringing people in to see. Thanks to everybody who joined today. Thanks for everyone who watches on the replay. Now you can go over and say hello to Prof, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.